Good evening. Welcome again to the Health and Wellness Show. Your health is your all. This is Sabelo Sibanda presenting our weekly show looking at our health-related issues. For tonight, as you will have noted, the topic of our show, death by lifestyle, and looking at the vulnerabilities of African communities to our health-related issues. You find that many a time we don't necessarily associate our lifestyle with our health. The times that we tend to think about our lifestyle in relation to health is when something has gone wrong, and we now start thinking about how to correct the situation, how to rectify what could have gone wrong in as far as our health is concerned. So for tonight, what we'll be doing is looking at the relationship between our health and our lifestyle. More particularly, when we're talking about health and lifestyle, we're looking at the non-communicable diseases, which basically tend to be associated with lifestyle more than anything else. But before we go on further, I would ask Dr. Mutibe to introduce himself, and as we go on, we'll be asking Ms. Tando Msomi to also introduce himself, and then we'll go further into the thrust of our discussion. Dr. Mutibe, over to you, my brother.
Thank you, Advocate, and good evening. Good evening to everybody. I hope everybody is taking care of themselves with this pandemic that is going on. The advice is to never relent. Shouldn't let our guard off. Must continue to take care of ourselves. I am Haupalelwe Morwa Motebe. I'm a general practitioner in private practice. I do help at a local hospital here where I'm staying. It's in Azania, the Northern Cape province thereof. Yes, basically that's who I am. The topic today, non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable basically means it's not communicable, as in not contagious. These are diseases that are not characterized by being contagious. Basically, a person infecting another person. These are diseases that just happen on their own. Well, not really on their own, but you can't, when you have the disease, you can't really pass it on to the other person because of infection. The coronavirus is communicable, it's contagious, it's infectious. Now, non-communicable diseases are not like that. The examples are many. They start from physical ailments, they go as well to psychological or even psychiatric ailments that are also classified as non-communicable diseases. Now, because there are many, there are those that are actually of serious concern and actually life-threatening, in a way also not going to, or rather going to reduce a person's lifespan. The examples that I can give of non-communicable diseases are diseases like the respiratory tract infections, or rather not the respiratory tract diseases, which can also be related to our lifestyle or maybe the environment ourselves. The diseases of the heart, we call it cardiovascular, that's what to do with the heart, and so on and so forth. The psychiatric or psychological ones will be anxiety and the stress, depression, and so on. And they are tightly related.
Okay, doctor, thank you. Oh, sorry. I thought you were done. No, carry on, my brother. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. I was just wrapping it up. Yes, I'm done now.
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot. We are also joined by Tando Msomi. Tando is a dietitian. Tando, if you could introduce yourself, and then we will then proceed with the show. Just say a bit about who you are so the viewers know exactly more about you. Hi, Kando, we can't hear you. Please check your mic. Yes, please unmute yourself. Please, maybe what you could do is sign out and sign back in and see if that will help at all, because for some reason we cannot hear you at all. Just try again. No, let me, okay, sure, thanks. Okay, I'm not sure what is happening there, but for some reason we don't seem to be very successful in as far as getting Utando online. One of the things that as we talk about lifestyle diseases, I would like us to contextualize is what exactly it is that we mean when we talk about lifestyle diseases. When I first came across this concept or notion or understanding of the fact that there is something called lifestyle diseases, it was mainly related to the high profile young people, especially. When I say young, I'm talking about ranging between 35 and 50, who are dying of, like Dr. Mtibe has just told us, of conditions which are classified within the medical sector as non-communicable diseases. And it was becoming an issue as to why our people are getting affected by things like heart-related conditions, stroke, diabetes, and some such conditions at an earlier age. And necessarily, the interpretation when it was being presented and coming across was that these lifestyle diseases are mainly related to people who have basically stepped into affluence or have been affluent, and because of the lifestyle they are leading, informed by that affluence, they then lead a particular lifestyle. And because of that particular lifestyle, they find themselves, therefore, in a scenario whereby they are vulnerable to some diseases because of the choices they make, which choices are basically afforded to them by the affluence that they have either stepped into or have grown up with. But mainly, I tended to find that the more you look into this concept of lifestyle diseases, it was said to affect, in the main, those African people who were exposed to new money, where new money is interpreted loosely as to say people who are first coming into money, the new generation within a family, to actually know what it is to be referred to as rich or middle class. Whereas old money talks about money that has been in the family from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. And that is the association generally that was put to lifestyle diseases. But one of the things that I would like tonight for both Dr. Mtibe and Tando to take us through is that the more I interrogated this issue of lifestyle diseases, I realized that where we are concerned as African people, there is also the other end of lifestyle, where lifestyle diseases are concerned, whereby you find our people who have been confined to certain living conditions and where they are choices in as far as the kind of life they can live and the kind of diet and exposure to the environment is concerned is imposed upon them by the system that has basically created that particular living environment. For example, here in Cape Town, you look at places like Kaelicha, you look at places like Mitchell's Plain, Esqalo, Nyanga, Kukuletu. these sorts of places, the people in those conditions are also affected by lifestyle diseases. But their lifestyle is not a lifestyle that is informed by affluence. It is, on the contrary, a lifestyle that is informed by being impoverished. And this is the one side of the lifestyle diseases that hardly anyone talks about. And you find that in as far as the middle class and the rich are concerned, the lifestyle diseases that they have to deal with are more informed by the choices that they are able to make, much easier than the people who, for instance, come from these locations that I have just mentioned. And they are all over the country. You talk about Alexandra in Joburg. That is one of the classic examples of a lifestyle that basically creates in itself some conditions which necessarily end up impacting upon the health of a people. And that aspect of the lifestyle diseases is never really spoken about. And this is something that we need to begin to interrogate, because we are caught in a situation where people do not have the ability to make those choices in many of the cases that we are dealing with. And at the same time, when we're talking about lifestyle diseases, I would love for both Dr. Mtibe and Tando to also take us through a comparison, if it is possible, with our rural communities and our urban communities. To what extent has the shift from the rural areas to the city also contributed to this concept of lifestyle diseases? And Otando, being the specialist dietitian, she will also take us through the kind of lifestyle with lifestyle diseases pertaining to exercise as well, which is one of the most important things in as far as how we basically live and therefore interact with this particular space. So now I'll just hopefully Tando's mic is back to life. Let me just get Tando to introduce herself, and then we'll continue with the show. Hi, Tando, over to you.
Hi.
Oh,
Hi.
I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect.
Welcome,
Good
welcome.
evening.
How are you doing? Hey, good
Very
evening,
well,
Tando. How are you?
thanks.
Great, great, great.
Right. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Tando Somi, and I am a practicing registered dietitian in private practice in Gauteng. It's in the province of Azania. Yeah, my passion is with regards to finding indigenous solutions related to health concerns that obviously pertain to different kinds of diseases that I'd be treating and managing within the practice. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. I will now ask Dr. Mtibe to come in. And Doctor, I would like us to basically talk to two particular issues which I would like you to address, which is from your practice as a medical doctor. What sort of cases are you seeing and are you witnessing in as far as the issue pertaining to lifestyle diseases, looking at the way that I've basically introduced the concept with the lower end of the scale and the upper end of the scale, more particularly looking at the fact that in 2017, according to the South African National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, which was done by the Human Science Research Council, amongst the core findings of that particular research was that 26% of all South Africans, which at the time represented no less than 14 million people, were said to be food vulnerable. To what extent are these people also displaying some aspect of what we will call the non-communicable diseases, which are informed by lifestyle? So if you could talk to both ends of the scale as to what you are seeing and how you are responding to it from a medical perspective. Thank you, Doctor. Over to you.
Thank you for the question, Advocate. What I would say is this being Azania, there's actually a mix of people that we see. There's a great divide between the poor and those that are rich, such that the manifestations, therefore, of the non-communicable diseases are different, as you alluded to earlier on. What I would also emphasize is that we're also seeing some diseases that we would never used to see before, afflicting people from a rural background, but we can easily see the link between that and affluence, such that yes, it is very important, the link between how we live and also our background and our economic status as well, and our environment where we are living. So there is now almost, I can say, an overlap, probably even the blurring of the lines as far as the diseases that used to affect Africans are concerned. But those who are still trapped in poverty, you find that they are actually affected by a different diseases. So yes, the economic status of people does have a bearing on what diseases they see. An example will be the rise in cancers, the rise in diabetes mellitus, the rise in hypertension. And these are all non-communicable diseases. But one cannot even stop to or not mention the fact that psychologically as well, moving from a rural area to an urbanized area, the stressors there and how it is that people get depressed, some even lose their minds because they've moved from the one area to the other. So non-communicable diseases have a real and a great bearing on where one is living.
Elaborate upon as well. You mentioned that there are some diseases that you are beginning to see, like the cancers, for instance. Given the environment that our people are exposed to, and given the fact that the medical assistance, if I can call it that, in as far as, maybe, let me say basically the healthcare, given that there is an issue with the healthcare facilities, to what extent does this then also impact upon the lifestyle diseases that we are seeing? Are the lifestyle diseases that are affecting the rich the same as the ones that are affecting the poor?
No, thank you. No, there's actually a clear division there. They cannot be the same because of the what people eat actually, and basically how their day is spent. If one's day is spent more in a sedentary kind of lifestyle, therefore their life, the disease that afflict them will be different from the one who's actually having to dig holes or having to dig trenches and do physical labor. So there is that difference. And I suppose we can call it lifestyle, although the emphasis on lifestyle is more of a choice. In some situations, you'll find that people have not really made that choice. It's the environment within which they find themselves. And thus, people from a rural background, their diseases are not really the same as people from an affluent side of our society. And the healthcare system is also not catering to the same. People who've got medical aid, they are more advanced in terms of getting healthcare than people who have to queue on long queues in our public hospital. So even access is not the same. the least said about information, the better, because even information is not dispensed equally because of the economic status of people.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. You alluded to something which is very, very interesting to me, Doctor, where you talk about the issue of food, which now takes us directly to Tando's domain as a dietitian. As you speak to issues of diet, Tando, I would like you to also maybe be ready to respond to an issue which we are observing in our communities. And maybe Dr. Mtibe will also speak to this particular aspect after you are done. We are noticing that more and more our people are being exposed to fast food outlets in our communities. And for some of our people, the pricing of these fast foods is such that it is so affordable, they can basically spend maybe half of their food budget on fast foods. So I would like you to be able to give us guidance on the health aspects related to fast foods. Should we be spending more on fast foods? Should we be taking more of fast foods? Or should we be avoiding these fast foods for something else which could be perceived as better in as far as nutritional value is concerned? What is the nutritional value of the fast foods? And at the same time, I would like you to also be able to talk to the quality of the food that we are eating. You find that now there is a tendency for our people to eat lots of rice, lots of pasta, and the pap that we are basically eating. I've been around. I usually make it a point that when I buy food, I look at the ingredients. And when I look at the milli meal that is being sold, everything that I have been able to find so far, which is local, which is produced here in Tanzania, that is GMO. Should we be concerned about that, or what should we be doing about that? It's either we are eating highly refined foods or we are eating GMOs. And the only meal that I seem to find that speaks aspect pertaining to highly refined foods and also the issue pertaining to the fast foods. And then after that, I would like us, we will get into the issue pertaining to the kind of diet that you recommend as the kind of diet that will take us forward as a people. Over to you, Tando.
All right. So when it comes to fast foods, or fast food outlets rather, there was an interesting article I read recently where it was an international article. It's from America, where they were saying that per square kilometer, you actually find that rather than there being like a grocery store or a fresh food outlet, fast food outlets are more available per square kilometer, and the Food and Agricultural Society in America had actually termed it food desert, because it was in a term where we're looking at less nutritious food being available to people within an area per square kilometer in an urban space. So as we're dealing with that, definitely nutrition wise, fast foods are not so beneficial. You'll find that they tend to be high in your protein, they're much higher in your salt content, which leads to your high blood pressures. Also, very low in fiber, which is where we are finding a lot of your cancers, or a lot of the risk factors to developing your cancers as a result, because it's highly processed. And not only just cancers, another condition that's become more and more prevalent now, more especially within the Black community. It used to be something that was more prevalent within the white communities, is your irritable bowel syndrome or irritable bowel disease, as a result of obviously having a diet that is very refined. So cost-wise, yes, we could say that for the more affluent people, because we're again looking at the double burden of disease, that people who are not in your urban areas, who are not getting very good salaries, fast food is actually a luxury for them, not something that they'd be able to afford more often. But for those who are more affluent, it does become something that may seem more affordable. I'd like to put it in that sense, that it may seem more affordable, but if we were to compare the cost of actually preparing a nutritious home cooked meal compared to buying whatever fast food products that you would get, the cheapest amount being, let's say, within your 30-40 rands that you'd be able to get a fast food meal, you'd actually find that your home cooked meal would amount to about half as much of that, and you'd be getting a full meal that has more nutritious more nutritious ingredients in it, like your vegetables, that you'd be able to include your fresh protein that is much leaner than the processed protein that you'd find in your fast food meal that you'd be buying. So in comparison, definitely home cooked route works out to be better, but then we need to obviously address issues such as time management when it comes to that. What I usually advise for patients who come through, because we do know that your urban lifestyles tend to be more busy, is factoring it in, whether it be during quieter times, like pre-prep meals. In that way, you anticipate the times that are that are more busier. So it either be, if it were in a family setting, that in the evenings you'd pre-prep for the day before, so that you know that you do have your breakfast and you're able to then go along, have a day where you've got your lunch already pre-packed and you don't have to end up finding temptations to anticipate that would be able to assist. And in times where maybe work schedules, because when we speak about stress, there are different types of jobs that we are involved in. Some people do shift work. Some people may not even have that time during the week as a result. So I actually advise even quieter times, like your weekends or your off days, pre-prep in advance, and that way you'd be able to save. Going on to the point or the question that you had asked me, Advocate, with regards to carbohydrates. Definitely the kind of carbohydrates that we are getting now on the shelves in the market are more refined than what even prior to the times where we were having white maize. I saw you, or you were alluding to the fact that sorghum would be one of the grains that is more recommended. And yes, definitely it is, because it is more coarse and it contains magnesium and the fiber also, which would obviously assist in better blood glucose control, which overall is a preventative measure towards developing certain types of diseases of lifestyle. And the fiber, again, as I'd spoken about it, being preventative for your diseases of lifestyle, such as your cancers, your different types of cancers that you'd be able to get. But other than that, if we look at our indigenous, what is it? Our indigenous grain.
Tando,
Yes.
sorry, Tando, before you go to the indigenous side of things, have a bit of a discussion with you on the prepping of the food for the next day.
Yes.
There is an aspect that I would like us to look at, because we do have people who will carry their lunch tin to work. They prepare, they get up at 4 or 5 in the morning just so that they are able to report to their workplaces on time. But in that particular lunch tin, you find that they've probably put in there slices of bread with maybe polony, and maybe they've got their fried chips, and then from there there's maybe a petrol station nearby. They go and buy a big bottle of Coke or something like that. So for them, they're preparing themselves for the next day. That is good. But the nutritional value of that meal, to what extent should they be paying attention to it? And at the same time, we have seen in Joburg, they call it ikota. And here in Cape Town, they call it Gatsby. A lot of our people, especially our young people at school, you find that that is one of the convenient meals. They go during break. There is a place just close to the school which will be selling a quarter, or people just go there. And for those who might not know or understand what we're talking about when we're talking about e-quarter, it's basically bread with an option of chips and maybe polony, Vienna sausage, or some such things. And then, of course, there's also iguinya. That's another readily available and very cheap sort of item for us to have. What do you say about that? And I would love, after you are done, for Dr. Mtibe to also come in and be able to talk to us about the kind of things that these things do to our health and what they are seeing in the hospitals as a result. Sorry, Tando, we'll go after that. Then please do get into that traditional discussion that you are going into. I just would like you for you to unpack these aspects I'm talking about now.
All right. Sure. When it comes to pre-prepping meals, maybe what I'd like for us to delve deep, what is a nutritious meal, what is a nutritious and balanced meal, and maybe also looking in proportion wise, what are we looking at? All right. So looking at your example of a pre-prepped meal with polony, and there's refined bread. In this instance, I was imagining white bread being used, even brown bread, because brown bread is almost within the glycemic index almost the same as white bread. There's not much fiber benefit that you'd get from brown bread. Better whole wheat bread, or better than whole wheat bread would be seed bread. With the slab chips and cool drink, or having a kota, which would be even a similar setup, but with even more processed protein that a person would be including there. All right, so the processed protein usually contains high amounts of saturated fats and high amounts of sodium, which are both not very beneficial to our health, because the types of fats that we want to include more in the diet, which we term good fats, are your mono unsaturated types of fats, which we get from like your avocado oils. A lot of your seed oils would have that type of fat. But when we look at your processed meats, because it comes from your cheaper cuts of meat, it tends to have the saturated fat, which is solid at room temperature. And the way it is dangerous to our health is that because it's solid at room temperature, once you ingest it and it is absorbed into the system, it is able to become in that solid state, also obviously then results in high triglyceride levels, your vascular types of diseases, which is your diabetes, your hypertension, your heart disease, or which are the common diseases of lifestyle. So definitely, rather than going for those processed types of meat, we want your leaner cuts of meat, which again, as we were speaking about the double burden of disease, does present a challenge, unless we are looking at going back to indigenous ways again, because when I see patients at the practice, if I'm seeing pro bono case patients who are from rural areas, what you find in that case is that because there is not much income that they'd be having, most rural families are, there's not that many who are employed. If there was a person who is employed, they would be employed in the urban area and be coming back home, which is where we are also seeing double burden of diseases, because this person who has the affluent lifestyle brings that back home, and then those eating habits are then incorporated as part of the habits and lifestyle that have been adopted with the westernization. But in the normal case, you'll find that most people are surviving on a social grant in most cases, whether it's one person in the household or a number of them who are either receiving a child grant or pension of some sort. And that is not enough for them to be able to afford your more luxury items like your eggs, your milk, your proteins, and as a result, they tend to farm more of those types of items. So you'll have cows, you'll have sheep or goats that they're farming, or chickens that they'd be having, where they'd be able to get protein and eggs as their source from those animals. So those are the types of proteins that you would obviously rather want to include in the diet. And we're looking at least having more of the white meat than the red meat. So your chicken, your pork without the fat, your fish would be what is much more beneficial to include in the diet, because it has the healthy types of fats that we've spoken about, and less content of fat and salts than your processed meats or your red meats would have. So once a week, have red meats, include more of the white meat in the diet. When we're looking at the types of starch, again, rather go for brown bread, which would be more affordable, because in affordability, it's a couple of rands more than what your white bread would cost. And in some cases, if you're going for it, not the brands or labels, and just the bread that's being sold by the supermarket, it actually turns out to be cheaper than what your white bread would cost. So yeah, that is what I'd advise in that case, that make sure that the meal is well-rounded and nutritionally balanced. Another part that might seem to be as a result of a lack of funds would be when it comes to the vegetables and fruits. So we'd want to make sure that we're including more of that. And again, when I speak to my patients, especially patients from your township backgrounds, I'd always say that when it comes to fruits and vegetables, I think it's about learning, relearning, and unlearning certain habits that we tend to have developed with urbanization. So double burden of disease. You can see in the rural areas, we have more impoverished people who would look at diseases of lifestyle, your cancers. But when we look at your township setup, because it's a mixture of both, you usually find that it represents a hybrid, actually, where you'll find both poverty and affluence within the same area. So when it comes to fruits and vegetables, I do not believe that it's really an affordability issue, but it's more a habitual issue that we struggle with within our own people, because where there are what is it, your hawkers who are selling on the streets, you'll find that a packet of your small chips costs, which is about 45 grams, like whatever brand of chips that they be selling, would cost you about R1 or 2. And they'll also sell fruits on that very same table, and it will be costing the same amount. So it is just a decision of preference, that what do I go for? Do I go for the fruit, or do I go for the chips? Which in this case, we need to reinstill a culture that we had lost back in the day, where going for the fruit would be something that you would go for, rather than the chips that are more processed and contain a lot of salts in them. So I think when it comes to that, we really need to reinstill that. We need to be examples as adults to our children, because it doesn't help to teach that to our children or to emphasize that without setting that example ourselves in how we plan our meals and prep our meals as adults ourselves. So yeah, those are the main things that I'd like to pinpoint when it comes to the meals. Yeah, I hope I'd answer your question well.
Oh, no, most definitely, most definitely. Thank you very much, Tando, and I hope it's helping to contextualize a lot of what our people are dealing with. I'll just now bring in Dr. Mtibe. Doctor, you've heard what Tando was saying about some of these issues pertaining to diet and everything like that. I would like you to come in and talk to us about the diseases related to the kind of things that Utando was talking about, amagwinya, ikota, and these other fast foods sort of things. What are you seeing in the hospital which is directly related to these kinds of diets?
Okay. Thank you again. Yeah, I think in a way Tando has touched some of the stuff that we do see, because of too much salt content, because of too much sugar content. The general belief, actually, in the medical fraternity, is that we are a sugarized community in like society. There's too much sugar almost in everything. The salt content is also very high. Now, all those actually lead to diseases, especially afflicting the heart. Heart attacks, heart failures, because the blood pressure is too high, it's difficult to control. We see even younger people now getting high blood pressure compared to before. Diabetes is coming seriously, considered now almost a pandemic because of the eating habits that we have. Gout is also on the rampage as well because of also eating in that way. Cancers are also on the rise, and it's a serious problem. One can also maybe here add the fact that as much as it's more of the stuff that we eat, there's also something that affects what we choose to eat, which is economics. Some people are left with no choice to go for magwinya. Some people are left with no choice maybe to eat quarters or so much, because it's kind of easier and maybe more affordable. And the lifestyle that comes out of that is then that generally people are not eating in a healthy way. Stress as well because of economics, not knowing when is your next meal gonna come from, makes it also say for people to choose a healthy food, it's not really a priority. As long as you eat, then it's fine. What is in there is secondary. And the main thing is to access the counts, and that is why maybe people become indiscriminate in what they eat. But it doesn't make it any better. The diseases do come. Too much salt, high blood, and the high blood uncontrolled or too much, being too high leads to heart problems and so on and so forth. I alluded to diabetes mellitus. I need to also maybe add that because of stress and other stuff, people tend to smoke a lot. That also affect their health. Cancers, especially because of smoke, lung cancer, but it starts with just a simple thing like from the lips. Can have a cancer on your lip, in your mouth, your throat because of smoking. The diet that have been alluded to earlier on can cause cancer because of the way they are going to be processed in our stomach, our GIT, gastrointestinal tract. Also make us be predisposed more to cancers of the stomach, cancers of the colon, small intestine, and so on and so forth. Lifestyle activity also, or rather, because of stress, we also tend to, like I said earlier on, smoking. But because of mental and psychological stress, anxiety, depression, it makes it easier for these other things to come into play. So you are anxious or maybe depressed, high blood comes into play easier in that way because you stress a lot, high blood goes up. So you find that a vicious cycle is being created whereby because you are stressed because of your economic and social situation, you get these non-communicable diseases, and they also lead to high blood and stuff like that. So yes, the way it is now, it's just that it also affects the way people present, patients present to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor. I would like, you mentioned something very interesting. You are talking about some of these diseases beginning to manifest themselves at an earlier age in as far as our people are concerned, because we're now seeing that some diseases which thought were only associated with elderly people are actually manifesting even people as young as 30 or so, developing heart-related conditions, diabetes, and stroke and those kind of things. What I would like for you to maybe give us an understanding on, at what stage should we start thinking about eating right? Can I just eat whatever I feel as long as I'm young? And only when I'm getting old, I start thinking about a proper diet? Or is it something that I have to basically instill, as what Utando was saying, that it has to become something habitual? Should it be habitual from an earlier age? Is it possible that I can eat junk now and the diseases will only manifest later? Or when I start eating junk, that's when I'll see the diseases coming through? What do you advise in that sort of context?
Yeah, I would advise that it becomes a habit. It must become a habitual thing to eat healthy, because some of the manifestations of unhealthy eating are immediate and some of them take time to manifest. But you see, it's more of it becoming a life pattern, the way one eats. So it becomes important that you adopt that kind of lifestyle. It's almost like the opposite is true in that if one does not eat properly, then if they have to now go back and adopt a healthy way of eating, it becomes difficult because they are not used to that. They are not used to restricting salt in their food. That it becomes difficult. So once you adopt that and it becomes second nature to one, then it's not a problem. So yes, it should be a habit and it should go on like that because the manifestations of this are ongoing. Here is another thing that is very important: the genetic predisposition. You'll find that some people becomes easily afflicted by conditions because of their genetic makeup. We talked about cancers, we talked about diabetes, we talked about high blood pressure. Some people don't have to eat too much salt for them to have high blood and diabetes. Some people just have to eat even the bare minimum of salts, and then, but because of their genetic makeup, they become vulnerable. That's why it's so important that a healthy way of living is paramount, and it becomes a habit.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We are now into the last 10 minutes of our show. I'll be asking the both of you to give us your parting words so that we basically round everything up. But one of the things I would love for us to interrogate as we get into the future, what you have said to me is rather concerning in the sense that you are talking about some aspects which necessarily need policies which regulate how some of our people are exposed to these foodstuffs that we are or something like that. And we need to be able to avoid a scenario where to unhealthy food than there is to healthy food. And the thing that doctor spoke about as well, in as far as the issue of choices which are imposed on people, that the life conditions of some people are such that they don't have a choice. They just have to follow through. But one of the things that we are very emphatic about as the School of African Awareness, going back to a point that Utando raised when she was talking to issues of diet, is the aspect related to a promotion of the traditional foods that are beneficial in as far as the nutritional value is concerned, and also the destigmatization of our own food and ourselves. Because you find that amongst the things that we have been basically pushed into by the so-called education system is to value everything that does not speak to who we are, and that also speaks to our food. I remember growing up where if you go to school and you've got your sweet potato as part of your lunch, oh my God, you became the laughing stock of the whole school, basically, because you were perceived as coming to school with something very, very backward. And the guy who comes in with pizza, oh wow, they are the hit. They're the best thing that basically ever happened in the school. And progressively, we have also written out of our own diet those things that are beneficial to us. How do we begin to reposition and therefore promote those foodstuffs which are beneficial to us? Are you aware of any research that has been done which we can maybe begin to look into and therefore begin to propagate more of who we are? Because what I'm finding now is that for some of our people now, you bring something traditional, like the last time you were talking about umhlonyane, and some people are saying they want some scientific evidence. And now, when we talk about our traditional foods as well, I'm sure there'll be some people who will be saying they want traditional evidence, they want rather scientific evidence that definitely what we are saying is the case, and therefore promoting Africanness from that perspective. Because when we are talking about Africanness, we don't isolate our being African from what we eat. What we eat is what makes us the Africans that we are. So the more that we push for our African identity, it necessarily means we have to address the food that we eat, which therefore makes us the African people that we are. So as you give us your parting shots, I would like for you to also speak into that particular aspect of repositioning our food and the nutritional value of our African food. I'll start with you, Tando.
All right. When it comes to mind the double burden of disease, so there are bodies that are fighting for sugar tax, as we are aware, because sugar tax has already been implemented. So as to try assist in reducing the amount of sugar beverages or sweetened beverages that people are consuming, since science has shown that there's a direct link between certain diseases of lifestyle, such as your hypertension and diabetes, to the amount of sweetened beverages that people drink. And it's still an ongoing debate and something that is being worked on still, because it's only your cool drinks that have the sugar tax put on them, not all sweetened beverages, because as dietitians, when we speak about sweetened beverages, you'll be surprised how long and comprehensive that list would be. Even your fruit juices are termed sweetened beverages, because the amount of sugar you'd find in fruit juice is much higher than what you would actually find in actually having a fresh fruit. So your sweetened water, your vitamin water, even some foods that might be termed energy drinks that you might think are actually quite healthier, they contain a lot of sugar, about 15 to 18 teaspoons of sugar, almost the same as how much you'd be getting in a serving of food drinks. So it's something to keep in mind when it comes to that. The last time I spoke with an organization that deals closely with policies that have to, or food related policies in South Africa, HEALA, we had spoken about fat tax also being something that they're considering. So as we were saying, I was speaking about the double burden of diseases. Such taxation helps in the sense where we're looking at the affluent people, because we are feeling that because we had spoken about how easily accessible it is to them, because they have more money, maybe a slap on the wrist would be something that would obviously make them less likely or discourage them to actually consume or even buy those foodstuffs. But it would not really be that beneficial to a person who is impoverished already, and already struggling to make ends meet in terms of what they can provide for themselves, or put on the table. So that's something to keep into consideration when it comes to the taxation part, in trying to steer people towards eating healthier diets. So that then brings me to the point of education. I think we cannot stress enough the importance of relearning information, and cutting out everything that might be myths that are related to healthy living and the diet. What to do with our cultural diets, science and research. Yes, there's been various studies that have been conducted, and there's been that rural diets tend to be more protective against diseases of lifestyle that we have mentioned. Obviously, in the rural sense, what we had spoken about is the challenge in terms of lack of having enough. But in a space where you're having more of your greens, you're having less refined carbohydrates. That's what I wanted to touch upon when we were speaking about maize meal. The kind of maize meal we'd have back in the day was not as refined as the kind that we are buying right now at the supermarkets, because it would be ground using stone. And in that way, it was also the whole grain being ground. So you'd get a maize that is more yellow in color. And that used to be a maize that was used back in the day, or maize came. So this white maize has the germ removed from it. and the germ is what actually contains a lot of nutrition. It's high in vitamin A, which is beneficial for your gut health, which is beneficial for your eye health. So we miss a lot of nutrients in this whole processing of the maize meal or the grain, which is why, as nutritionists or dietitians, we actually recommend, let's say, SAMP being better than having your white maize meal, for example. Although that is not the ideal or the gold standard or the best. What would actually be better than that is yellow maize, and you can go read about that, research that. That was how the maize was back in the day, and it's now become a health product. That's how much people have in the Western culture have cashed into how beneficial our diets were previously. You'll find it on a health store shop, costing you probably double the amount of what your white maize meal is, because of how much nutrition that actually contains more than your white maize meal. So it's about us just re-educating ourselves. As I'm speaking about this health product, you can see that the markets do acknowledge the benefit that our indigenous diets have, and it's just about us relearning and going back to certain practices that we had as a people, and seeing them start from early teens, and that's very concerning. That's very concerning.
Thank you very much for that, Tando. It's interesting, actually, when you talk about the yellow maize, because when we were first introduced to yellow maize, I remember in Zim, when yellow maize came through, it came through during the time of drought, and everyone basically looked down upon it, and at some point it was considered a stock feed, and something that was only eaten by the desperate and the very, very poor. It's very interesting that you are putting a totally different twist to it now. It's something that we definitely need to learn more about. I love your emphasis on relearning and re-educating ourselves, which basically sums up why we're here, because the reason why we exist is to address the ills of miseducation and diseducation. And these are some of the ills of our miseducation: to hate ourselves enough to basically diss our own diet, which is good for us, and go for something which is less than what is ideal, simply to identify with other people's ways. And can you just, in a couple of seconds or minutes, clarify when you talk about the double burden of disease?
Okay, so by double burden of disease, what I'm speaking about in that sense is obesity and malnutrition. So obesity-related types of diseases, which is or your non-communicable diseases like your diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, cancers, those would be more prevalent in the more affluent society. Malnutrition is the other disease that we're looking at, and there you'd find like your protein energy malnutrition, your kwashiorkor, your marasmus being cases that are more prevalent. And that is in general what we'd be looking at when we looking at the double burden of disease.
Thank you very much, Tando. Thank you very much. It's been a great show, and I've learned a lot. That's one of the things I enjoy about this program, that I really learn a lot. It's an opportunity for me to relearn as well, and I'm loving it. Over to you, Dr. Mtibe. if you could give us your parting words and also maybe your thoughts on the issue of policy and the repositioning of our African foods.
Yeah. One is actually impressed with what is being done, with the sugar taxes and stuff, that actually there is an awakening to the fact that some of the stuff that we are using may not be that well or that good for ourselves. So yes, there is the trend, there is a movement towards isolating and seeing and identifying these eating habits that are actually making us ill. So one is actually encouraged on that. One also needs to also add that it's actually a complex problem. Earlier on, we talked about how sometimes people really don't have a choice. And then their situation makes them such that actually thinking about eating healthy, it's not really a priority. It's all about eating, and then whether it's healthy or not, it will come second. And our traditional way of eating, Thando has nicely explained, most of the meals that we eat traditionally, they are not that much refined and processed too much, and that is what makes them very healthy and good. They are much more in a natural state. So yes, the idea here is to make sure that we incorporate our foods that we identify as healthy. We talked about yellow maize earlier on, that we identify as healthy into whatever it is that is being eaten now, and make sure that we only choose what is good for ourselves. And that should be the way forward. And of course, education, relearning, and more education. Information is very important. We need to share the information. And one is very happy to be part of this platform whereby we try to share information and make people aware of these little things that are actually making a big impact. I mentioned last time that the best investment one can make is in one's health. It also starts with food. What we eat, watch it, and make it a habit that we eat healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mtibe, and thank you very much, Thando. I really hope that we are learning in as far as the general viewership is concerned, and that people will continue to learn, and we will be here. We are Upondo TV and radio, blasting out the sounds of African awareness, and we will forever do that to make sure that as we make our contribution to the advancement of the global African nation, we do so in ways which are practical and talk to the consolidation of who we are as a people. Thank you very, very much. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.